Tears already streak your face. 35 miles is nothing, my father said, his tone teasing, almost whimsical, as if he were chiding a toddler rather than leaving his daughter on a desolate county road. No shoulder in sight, with the sky splitting apart above. The first raindrop traced the curve of my nose. Then a curtain of rain followed, icy, sharp, unyielding. The gravel beside the pavement turned to mush, gripping my shoes as if the ground itself wanted to erase me. Headlights flickered faintly in the distance, uncaring. My breath clouded the air, my fingers trembled. My phone lay dead in my pocket, useless by design. He'd ensured that. No charge, no money, just a lesson. I didn't run after his fading taillights. I didn't plead. I watched the red glow shrink and disappear, like a lock turning on a room I'd known all my life. Hi, I'm Marin Vale, and I learned long ago to keep my expression steady. The kind of steady that fools people into thinking you're whole, when your chest is a cage trembling through a tempest. I was raised with rules that shifted like shadows, love tangled with control. Apologies always carrying a price tag. So when he said I needed to learn, I already knew the syllabus. Shame, fear, silence, and how to endure without letting him see me crack. Rain pricked my scalp like needles. The water tasted of iron, the sky's static clinging to my tongue. I stepped off the road to stand under a lone billboard advertising storage units, its cheerful key mascot grinning with dimples. The ink bled down the sign like smudged eyeliner. I let the night hum around me. Frogs croaked in the ditch, a mocking chorus. The breeze swept through the fields, lifting damp strands from my neck. My father's car was long gone. The silence after cruelty isn't silent, it buzzes. I thought of all the times he'd said, strong women don't complain. How he'd label any hint of a boundary as weakness. How he'd chuckle when I said no, as if I'd stumbled over a simpler word. I imagined him already home, smug and warm, telling my mother I'd return humbled, quieter, grateful. Then a black truck eased onto the shoulder, tires hissing softly on the wet gravel. The driver's door opened, and a tall figure stepped into the rain, coat untouched by the downpour, stance radiating certainty. Miss Vale, he said evenly, time to go. I climbed in without brushing the water from my face. Warmth enveloped me, steady as a hand at my back. In the side mirror, the storm slashed white streaks across the road like a ledger of pain. My father believed in teaching lessons. He just didn't know he'd enrolled in mine. A final class, no do-overs, graded on mercy I no longer owed him. The truck's door clicked shut, and the heater's hum wrapped my bones like a quilt drawn from a mother's embrace I never knew. My bodyguard, Elias, kept his gaze ahead, hands firm on the wheel. His jaw was chiseled, unreadable, but his silence was intentional. He understood what my father never could. Not every wound craves words. Sometimes it just needs room to breathe. Water streaked the windshield, blurring the world into silver smudges. My pulse still raced with the rhythm of betrayal. Erratic, raw, abandoned. I pressed my hand to the warm vent, trying to thaw the chill that had sunk too deep. Did he really leave you out here? Elias asked, voice soft, like a man who knew the answer but offered me the respect of speaking it. I nodded once, my throat too tight to speak. He didn't press further. The miles slipped away, headlights sweeping over endless fields, ditches swollen with rain devouring the night. Each turn of the tires felt like crossing more than distance, something heavier. Years of silence, control, believing cruelty was just discipline honed to a point. At a crossroads, Elias slowed. Do you want to go home? He asked. The word home cracked something inside me. It meant a house I knew by heart, but never a place that held me in return. I turned to the window, the storm's reflection glaring back, fierce and cold. No, I whispered, the word new on my tongue. His eyes flicked to me, no pity, just respect, a soldier recognizing another. He pressed the gas. Somewhere behind, my father was already weaving his tale of how he'd taught me a lesson. He didn't know his voice was fading, like rain tapping the roof. Tonight, the student he tried to shatter was drafting her own syllabus. The first chapter began when I said no. The truck carried me forward, but for him, time had frozen. The rain softened to a murmur, but inside me, the storm roared. Elias's headlights sliced through the wet dark, each beam a tether pulling me from the man who thought he owned my spirit. I sat stiffly, hands clasped, fingers aching from holding myself together. Where do you want to go? Elias asked, steady, as if distance didn't matter. I thought of places I dreamed of fleeing to, cities where my name meant nothing, apartments with locks I controlled, kitchens smelling of fresh bread, not control. But tonight I wanted one thing, distance. Anywhere but back, I said. Elias nodded once, as if he'd expected it. He veered off the main road toward the interstate, tires humming a steady lullaby. I watched raindrops race down the glass. Behind me was a man who thought abandonment was a lesson, that daughters were clay to mold with cruelty, that silence was submission. For years I'd let him believe it. Tonight, he'd learned how wrong he was. Do you want me to call someone? Elias asked softly. A bitter laugh scratched my throat. Who? My mother? She'd say to forgive him. My brother? He's his shadow. There's no one. There's me, Elias said, plain and certain. No vows, no fanfare, just truth. Something shifted inside me. Not relief yet, but a hairline fracture in the wall I'd built. I let my head rest against the seat, the leather faintly scented with damp earth and pine. My body released a breath it felt I'd held for years. In that quiet, I pictured my father's face when he realized his grip had slipped like dust through his hands. That day was coming, not with shouts or slammed doors, but like this night, quiet, inevitable, crushing. I closed my eyes. The road stretched on. My vengeance had just drawn its first breath. By the time we hit the interstate, the rain had dwindled to a mist, a faint silver veil fading to nothing. Streetlights glowed every few miles, halos in the fog, each one a marker whispering, "You're farther. You're freer." Elias drove with the calm of a man who knew threats often trailed behind. His eyes flicked to the mirrors, vigilant. He waited until my breathing steadied before speaking again. What do you want to do, Marin? The question cut deeper than it should have. For years, my answers were scripted. What my father wanted, who he demanded I be, how small he needed me to stay. To be asked what I wanted felt almost painful. I swallowed. I want him to feel what I felt tonight, abandoned, small. I said, voice low but edged like a blade. I want him to know silence isn't strength, it's hollow. I want him to look around and see no one left beside him. The truck's engine thrummed. Elias's grip on the wheel tightened slightly, but he stayed quiet. He understood. We passed a sign, city limits, 12 miles. Its glow settled in my chest like a vow. I imagined my father at home, pouring a drink, bragging about tough love, laughing at the image of me sobbing in the rain. He didn't know I wasn't crying anymore. He thought he'd left me stranded. But I was the one leaving him behind, 35 miles and a lifetime away. The storm outside was fading. The one inside me was just igniting. And when it broke, he'd finally faced the lesson he'd written for himself. City lights spilled across the horizon like a chain of embers, flickering against the wet road. Elias guided us into their glow. Calm as a man stepping into a story with an ending he already knew. I pressed my forehead to the cool window, watching neon signs blur into streaks of color. For the first time in years, no one was watching, judging, measuring me. I was just me, and the weight of that freedom was almost too much to bear. We pulled into a quiet diner on the town's edge, its red sign buzzing, half its letters dark. Inside, the scent of coffee and fried onions wrapped around me, warm, simple, healing in its ordinariness. Elias slid into the booth across from me, hands folded, posture precise. Food first, he said. Plans next. The waitress poured hot coffee, and I curled my fingers around the mug, its warmth seeping into me, loosening the cold my father had left behind. I stared at the dark liquid and whispered, "He'll twist it, you know. By morning he'll say I ran off, that I defied him." Elias's eyes met mine steady. Doesn't matter what he says. What matters is what you do next. The words anchored me. I thought of every family dinner where my father's version of truth drowned mine. Every story reshaped until I couldn't find myself in it. But now, I held the truth, and the silence of being ignored no longer scared me. "I want out," I said at last. Not just from the house, out from under his shadow. Elias gave a single nod, the kind a soldier gives when the mission is clear. Then we make sure his shadow never falls on you again. The rain had stopped. Outside the diner's fogged windows, the night was clearing, a lone star piercing the thinning clouds. For the first time, I wasn't measuring the distance my father had left me. I was measuring how far I could go without him. And that distance would be my sharpest weapon. Dawn crept in softly, the sky brushed with pale grays and shy pinks. I hadn't slept. Elias napped for an hour in the booth, but I stayed awake, the coffee mug warm between my palms, tracing its rim like it could sketch a path forward. When he woke, he looked at me as if he could see the determination carved into my face. "You're ready," he said, not a question. I nodded. I'm done letting him define me. But I don't want yelling or shattered doors. I want him to watch his world crumble bit by bit until he sees I was its foundation. Elias leaned forward. Then we hit what he values most, his image, his respect, his reputation. The word reputation sparked something in me. My father fed on control, but he thrived on admiration. The picture of a firm, disciplined man raising strong children. If that image cracked before the right eyes, he'd have nothing. We drove as the city stirred. Commuters filled the streets. Bakeries lifted their shutters. Newspapers slapped wet pavement. I watched it all, feeling myself sharpen. At a stoplight, Elias spoke. He thinks silence is your weakness. Make it your weapon. The idea settled in me. Silence had been my cage, but it could be my blade. Not rage, not arguments, just absence. My presence erased from his life. My voice speaking truth to those who mattered. My quiet refusal to play his game. When we stopped at a small apartment complex, Elias turned to me. "This can be yours. Papers, lease, protection, I'll handle it. You just decide what to say when he comes looking." The weight of choice pressed against me, but it wasn't heavy, it was freedom masked as fear. I stepped out, the air sharp and fresh, scented with wet concrete and jasmine. I wasn't just 35 miles away anymore. I was in a new orbit, and my father was about to learn what true emptiness felt like. The apartment was modest, a one-bedroom with chipped paint and a fridge that hummed like it was clinging to life. But to me, it was a fortress, walls free of his voice, a key that was mine alone, a silence that was choice, not punishment. Elias carried in a box of essentials, clothes, documents, a charged phone. "It's not much," he said, setting it down. "It's everything," I whispered, my voice breaking not from fragility, but from the shock of breathing air untainted by his shadow. By day 2, the calls started. Unknown numbers lit up the screen, voicemails heavy with his voice. "Where are you? Come home. Don't humiliate me. You'll regret this." Each one dripped with his usual arrogance. Less concern for me, more rage at losing his grip. I didn't respond. That was my strength now. I began speaking softly, carefully, to those who once saw him as a pillar, old family friends, his colleagues from the club, my aunt who'd stopped visiting because of the tension. I told them what happened that night. How he left me 35 miles from home in a storm, with no phone, no wallet, just a lesson. Their silence on the line spoke volumes. Respect doesn't survive truth, it crumbles beneath it. By the week's end, the stories were spreading. My father's commanding voice started to sound fragile. His messages grew desperate, orders turning to pleas, threats to half-formed apologies. Elias stood by the window one night, watching the street, while I played the latest voicemail. My father's words were sharp, fraying. "He's coming apart," Elias said. I leaned against the counter, calm. "Good. Let him taste silence." Because silence wasn't absence anymore. It was a mirror, forcing him to hear his own cruelty echo back. He thought he'd abandoned me, but he was the one left behind. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the house I once called home. Its paint seemed faded, its windows dim, as if the walls had soaked up his unraveling. Elias waited in the truck, giving me space. This was my moment. I rang the bell. It took longer than ever for my father to answer. When the door opened, he looked diminished, not physically but in presence. His shirt was creased, his eyes bloodshot. The man who once towered now seemed hollowed out. "Marin," he said, relief and anger clashing in his voice. "You've made your point. Come back. Let's put this behind us." I stepped forward, but not inside. My voice was even, deliberate. "Forget you left me in the rain, 35 miles from home? You thought silence would shatter me, but it shattered you." He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. People know now. They see who you are when no one's looking, and they're watching closer than you think. His face paled, his authority slipping like ash through his fingers. For the first time, he was speechless. I pulled the spare key from my pocket, the one he'd given me with a lecture on duty, and set it on the doorstep. Its clink like a judge's gavel. "This isn't my home anymore," I said. "And I'm not your lesson. You're mine." The words struck harder than any shout. I turned and walked to the truck. Elias opened the door, and as I climbed in, I didn't look back. Through the windshield, I saw my father clutching the doorframe, swallowed by a silence that was finally his. I breathed in the crisp air, and the storm inside me settled into something solid. Betrayal had forged me, but it no longer defined me. He wanted control. I gave him emptiness. He wanted obedience. I gave him truth. And in that silence, my freedom roared louder than his voice ever could.